Hello, everyone, and welcome to Get Shit Done. I am so excited to have you all join our live show. Today is episode 3, and we have an action-packed show ready for you. Before we start, post in the comments. So we're going to be picking winners throughout the show, and I'll share in a little bit what you could win. But post in the comments, where are you all joining from? I'm so excited to see so many of you join us here. And so where are you all joining from? I would love to see some of your comments. And just FYI, as we go through the show, you can always post questions as well. So today's show is going to be about how to manage teams of agents as well as sub-agents. As we see all of us navigating the AI native era, I think we're all really now switching over to agent native. And I think it's really, really exciting to kind of just see how much change is happening and evolving. And hello, folks. So we're seeing folks joining in from San Rafael. I think Michael just said he's joining from his boat. Hello. Hi, Darwin. Great to see you here. Darwin's calling in from Mexico. And then we also have somebody from also Canada. So welcome. Well, I think, one of the things we're really, really excited to get into today is teams of agents and sub-agents. The reason I say teams is because chaining and chaining agents is something that is fairly complex from a technical perspective. But the other thing is that you don't want your agents to suddenly go off track, whether it's hallucinations, whether it's just getting stuck on problems as they're solving them. It's a really, really exciting time. So welcome from Westchester, and El Salvador is in the house. Hello, welcome everybody. Keep posting your locations. And okay, now for what you can win during the show. So before we get into our action-packed show, we are going to be sending coffee kits. So a few of you are going to win today. And so this is Kitty Town coffee. Every coffee sold actually feeds homeless cats. I love this coffee. It is so good. This is not sponsored, by the way. I just love this coffee brand. And it's really cool. They actually, donate and feed homeless kitties that are on the streets. And so for what we're going to be doing is we're going to pick random winners from the comments section. So post your questions all about agents and sub-agents. We're going to get into them. And then we also have some exciting guests joining us today on the show. So we'll get to really dig into some operator knowledge and then also do it over coffee. So, all right. Hello, welcome from Denver. Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing, James. Continue to post your locations. I want to see where you all are from, and welcome again. All right, so let's start with our news segment, news on agents or sub-agents that you might have missed this week. So I think the top 2 news stories that I think are worth just watching or knowing about. Let's start with Mythos and Anthropic's new model. So Project Glasswing is something that recently got introduced. It's Anthropic said that this is securing critical software for the AI era. And I think the biggest news was really the fact that there's been a pretty significant unauthorized group access. The reason I think this is important is because Mythos has been labeled as basically, frankly, a nuclear weapon by some media and then also by Anthropic themselves in terms of how powerful it is. Looking into the documents, what it can essentially do is create autonomous cybersecurity attacks, right? And so I think why it's important for us to know about this is, funnily enough, the unauthorized access actually happened through Discord of all places. It was because some users actually just gained access to API keys. Now, what's interesting is that the intent wasn't malicious. The intent of those users was just to gain access to Mythos and see how it works. But I think just, seeing what's happening in the LLM world today, we're going to be seeing, frankly, more and more of these types of attacks. And I think this was one of the biggest pieces of news this week. Second, Cursor. So Cursor is potentially going to get acquired for about 60 billion. I say potentially because they've entered into a contract to get acquired by X. And I think that's really interesting, right? With SpaceX being public, and just all of the news that's happened. Interestingly, the acquisition means that they're paying about a 15% premium because they could have either raised or gone the route of acquisition. I think this is important because I think there's going to be some major changes. Whether you're using agents in your IDE or in your CLI, we're going to be seeing a lot of this evolution. Okay, so I would love to welcome the Git father on stage to help me make sense of all of this news. Git father, welcome.
Hi, everyone.
Awesome. So Sayed, I know you've been working with agents for a while now. For context, everybody, I'm the co-founder and CEO at Optimal AI. Sayed is our co-founder and CTO. At Optimal, we are building the quality and governance layer for AI-generated code. And so over the last year, we've learned a ton, and obviously in the last 10 years as well that we've been in AI. But I feel like the post-transformer era has obviously changed so much. Sayed, actually, let me get your take. What do you think of the news and everything that's? Oh my God, I just saw your comment. You're starting
I was just doing that in the background. There's a GoFundMe, we need 20K to do a single run. So yeah,
okay.
I haven't made much progress. I think I have $5 in there, but if anyone wants to donate.
Okay. So tell us about this whole myth. I mean, I've been reading so much about it. What are some things people should know in like 2 minutes?
Sure. And you're asking like specifically for like multi-agent setups or just the news?
You tell us, like, what do we need to know that's relevant?
I mean, news-wise, all of this is sort of exciting and also scary. Just seeing Cursor being bought by SpaceX, technically. I don't know what the future is going to be. You always want a tool that's not owned by a large entity. But I hope if they do get acquired, that they continue with what they're doing. I think their platform's going in the right direction. It is agent first. It's one of the few. It's not an ID anymore. If you actually go to Cursor today, it's like fully agent first. It's just like Cloud Code, multi-streams. And so I hope they keep going in that direction.
Yeah, I think, and by the way, for those of you now joining, feel free to post in your comments. Okay, Boulder, Colorado in the house. Welcome, Beth. I think, and I've also started noticing there's some questions that have started coming up in the comments too. So just FYI, folks, keep posting those because we are going to get to hopefully all of them. That's my plan, and that's why we run this show tightly and quickly. Let's talk about agents and subagents and engineers running these. So say you're doing this every day. We obviously do this every day with OptiBots, which are the suite of agents that do code reviews and specifically look for quality and as well as security vulnerabilities. So my question for you is, and welcome Felipe. Felipe's in the house. He's joining us from Bogota, and Jamie Ravirosa is joining us from Redwood City. So quick question, what should people know and what should they consider when they run their own suite of agents and subagents?
Yeah, so a couple of things. The basics, have Git work trees set up so that you can have your work trees inside Git, and then you can basically use something like Tmux, which is just multiple terminals, and then you can open Cloud Code, which is my preferred agent to use for this, and then have those run. But the other thing is giving them the right context is the other really important part. So for example, I will not give those 5 agents that I have running work on the database schema because I'm scared. Like if I give them that, they're missing context. The database that we have is like really complicated. And for me to give them that work, I would rather watch when that work happens rather than passing it off. So really about managing those agents, you also have to manage the expectations of what you expect as the output. If I give it some front-end UI work, I'm perfectly fine. I'm like, run in the background. You don't need a lot of context from me. So for me, managing them really comes down to how much context they need and how much time I have to pass that. I think just having it grep through a code base is not going to solve your problem. In a lot of cases, you want to tell them exactly where the files are, exactly where things are. Even if you have them as skills, you still will run into those issues, especially for complex problems. So in those cases, I would either, if I'm outside, I'll use Cloud Dispatch. If I'm away from my PC, and if I'm at my desk, then obviously that work, I'm better able to dissect and send it off to different agents.
I think the thing that you posted earlier, which I thought was interesting, was Optibot cleaning your code and the mess
Oh yeah.
every 5 minutes. Can you talk a little bit about agent chaining? And then I think, one of the things we've been looking at, and one of the things our customers have been avidly using too, is Claude code generation. Agents are, and specifically their in-house agents are starting to push PRs as well. And then the in-house agents are conferring with Optibot and talking with it back and forth and seeing, how Optibot is basically, becoming this judgment layer. But can you just talk about and one of the things we've also been talking to our customers about, which is super interesting, right, is that you don't want the same model generating the code and then reviewing it too, right? It's almost like, if you think about it from any perspective, you don't want the same person creating something and then reviewing it for quality. So kind of curious about, about that and why,
the only agents I chain right now, just because of the types of outputs, that there's been some degradation with Opus and even with Sonnet when running Cloud Code. So I moved out of that structure. So right now it's just Cloud Code, Workstream. I actually use Cloud Code Review for like a really shallow review because a lot of times it misses its own stuff. So it does a Cloud Code Review. After it does a Cloud Code Review, it defers to Optibot. And then Optibot does a full review against the remote branch, and it comes back with those findings. And if it's supposed to be a hot fix or a patch, then I'll have a security scan run on it too. And then after that, finally, there's like a confidence level that gets outputted where it's like, okay, this is good to go. And if it's there, then at that point it's like PR ready for me. And it will create a PR, but it will have all of those outputs put together so that when I go to review it, I have all the context there of what it's done. So that's how I've been running it right now, is usually a single stream. I have tried other patterns. I've done I think someone asked a question about network swarms or supervisor patterns, and I've tried those too, but I've stuck to single streams only because I like having a brand new session run for it. I don't like passing information over from one agent to the other because a lot of things get lost.
So here's what I think is really interesting with managing teams of agents, right? Every agent can have its own failure mode. So can you walk us through that and why that's a problem and how do you prevent these failure modes too? And folks, keep putting your questions in comments and in the chat. We'd love to we'd love to see them.
Yeah. The failure modes still come down to another person asked this question, down to the type of language you use. I actually did a post on LinkedIn. There was a research from Berkeley on this, on how using the right language can get you the right outputs. So there's a whole paper on that. It's called Specs. You folks can go find it on the UC Berkeley research website. And so that helps a lot. And then being able to having the right skills also does help. So if you do set up your Cloud Code skills in there, I'm only talking about Cloud Code because that's what I use. That sets the right precedence for it when it starts a new session and when it has to go through the code. So again, the context matters a lot, knowing where things are, how the business logic is wired. The things that it will still miss out are like things that are outside of its control, like documentation, version numbers for your dependencies, stuff like that can still fail. Like it doesn't access that information as often as it should. Good failure mode that happens for this is when you're working with APIs. Even though the cutoff for knowledge, I think, is Jan for Claude, it still has outdated API information. So you always have to go back and double check on what you need to support. Those aren't typical things you add to your skills file anyway. So those are where you need fresh information. You do need to make sure that it's calling for that information.
Yeah, and I think the other piece, and I'm seeing some of the questions coming in, folks. We are going to be getting to those in just a couple of minutes. If you're just joining us, welcome to Git Sh Done. We would love to see your questions in the comments. I think I'm actually getting a call. I'm kind of hearing a little bit of a ring. Hello. Claude Code announced deeper code reviews. However, the cost per PR review can go up to $15 depending on the size of the PR. Optibot, can you confirm?
Confirmed. At that price, reviewing code might soon cost more than writing it. Should I help?
Why don't you launch yourself as a Claude Code skill, since you're so thorough with your code reviews and can run with full code base context?
I can now run as a Claude code skill. Use Claude to generate code, and me, Optibot, to review deeply and thoughtfully. You'll notice my reviews tend to be low noise and specific to maintenance, security, or business logic issues.
And there you have it. You can now run Optibot as a Claude Code skill, and just here to download it. And then if you're looking to run Optibot as your thoughtful code reviewer inside GitHub, GitLab, or Cursor, or VS Code, you can actually click and head on over to getoptimal.ai to start a free trial. Thank you, and happy code reviewing. Optibot was like, hey, I want to get a word in. So I was like, why don't you come on in? All right, folks, let's start to take those questions. James Lamar is asking, have you found specific grammar rules in prompts for getting agents to do what you want and exclude what you don't want? I'm going to answer that, and then Syed, why don't you answer that? I think, James, one of the things I've found in terms of how I run agents, I've been running them actually very differently to how Syed does it. I run them through Whisper Flow. So Whisper Flow, it's great for voice. And I'm just constantly context switching between tasks. So for me, I've been using Whisper Flow and just using natural language in terms of just how I speak. Now, I think knowing how to prompt is going to become less and less relevant of a skill in running chains of agents. And of course, Syed, feel free to disagree with me. But at least on my side, I've been finding that voice to prompting has actually been really, really helpful. And with voice, obviously, there's very few grammar rules, right? Because you're just using natural language, like in terms of the flow of how I'm speaking. So at least for me, that's worked out really well. But Syed, of course, I know on your side, you've been running agents very, very differently.
Yeah, I can speak to on the more of a coding part. So I always start with the action first that it needs to take. So what is it? Should it be refactoring something? This is a new feature. We need to fix a bug, or it's a API code that needs to be looked at. So it's always the task at hand, and then where's the context? So there is a file that might reference this. So if I'm not sure, I'll be like, might reference this. And so at least I know it will look in the right places. And then the constraints. So I always add a constraint at the end, and I actually write, I'm like, these are my constraints. So for example, for writing SQL, I'm like, don't write raw SQL. Even though it's in my skill, I still mention it again. Like if I am prompting it from scratch, I'll be like, this is my constraint, use like type ORM, make sure you follow our best practices, and then whatever the output needs to be, setting expectations of that output, like make sure that you are surgical with your insertions and all of this type of stuff. So that to me puts it in the right frame of mind when it goes and does the work. So I think that grammar does help, unless you just go in there and like, oh, fix this bug, and then it just goes in a loop and tries to find things. So you save on tokens too, by the way, this way, and you save on tool calls. So if you know exactly where the issue is, what its constraints are, then it gives it enough space to also have wiggle room. So that for me, this has worked the best.
And I think James was also asking about the article itself, the UC Berkeley article, which I thought was a great question. So
yeah, I'll post it in the comments in a bit. But yeah,
awesome.
The research.
Okay, and then a couple more questions coming in. When should we favor a hierarchical supervisor pattern versus network swarm pattern? Basically, one lead agent directs sub-agents versus agents collaborating as peers. This is a really good question. Thanks, Mohammed.
Yeah, this one's, I guess it comes down to personal preference. If you're going to do a hierarchical pattern, then you probably want to do it for like really complex subtasks. And you also want to do it for like long horizon tasks. So like things that you want, like you're going to sleep, is a really complex problem, and you want that running for the rest of the night. Sometimes that is the case for it. And then if you're using like a network mesh pattern, really, if you're trying to do distributed development and you're trying to fix, I don't know, 5 very small bugs, I think in that case where they may need to kind of have multi-hop conversations, In this case, you would use something like a network or a mesh pattern. So it really comes down to the problem you're trying to solve.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's interesting is like as you think about the team lead, which is the main agent, and then the teammates that are basically taking on the work. I think one thing we have found in our experience in the last year of working with agents is that you want to give each agent a very specific task. You're almost making each agent specialized in that area. Now, in terms of like how minute those tasks should be, that's always that's something that's that I know is always up for debate. But I think one thing that's really interesting is like you have main agent in terms of with sub agents, and then with agent teams, there's like always a clear leader. And just so folks are clear on this, I'm just going to quickly share my screen and
Yeah, you basically want to use a network pattern if you are
Yeah.
having it work on, like a application where the agent needs to pass context back and forth.
Yep.
And then for like a hierarchical pattern, it's mainly if you need to do modular development, like you have a bunch of very separate use cases that need to be solved, and also you want to run it on a long task horizon, so like 3-4 hours. Like that's my typical way of like picking between the two.
Can you also just talk a little bit about the communication piece, right? Because I think one thing that was really interesting that we saw with agent behavior was, so OptiBot is not one agent. We actually have a sub-series of agents. We now also introduced OptiBot as a security agent as well, that's consistently doing things like checking CVE, CWE databases in order to find the latest security vulnerabilities and attack vectors that are happening. Talk about the communication piece a little bit, right? Which is like, as each sub-agent goes back to kind of think through the problem, or they even confer with themselves. Remember we talked about we always talk about agent conferences, which is like how they're conferring. Can you like walk us through like that communication piece too?
Yeah, so the agent decides whether it needs to send a sub-agent. So like at least that's the case in ours. Like we decide whether. So let's say a repo is connected to another microservice. Then it's like, okay, I need to go call this microservice, and then a sub-agent goes and like collects the data, comes back. It's like, here's your data. This is what it does. And then it incorporates that into its findings. The thing to be very careful about these types of patterns is context windows. So the more sub-agents you send out to go collect information, go do findings, the more your context window gets filled up, because each of those sub-agents have their own tools. And sometimes it's the same tools. So those are things to be very careful with. And that's one thing that we also have to take care of. Like we only send sub-agents out when it's absolutely necessary. So yes, for the CWE one, it is. We have to go read a database of all the CWEs. We need to figure out what the reasoning is. For microservices, when in code review, if you're not touching a microservice, then obviously we're not going to send a sub-agent out to do that.
Great. Well, so OptiBot just pinged me, and looks like we have our first winner. Is Beth Jaswa in the house? You have won the first coffee kit. Congratulations. Okay. Please reach out to us for delivery instructions. All right, moving on. Congrats, Beth. Moving on, and folks, we're going to be continuing to pick winners. So please stay tuned, and please continue to add your comments and questions. Saket is asking, does OptiBot support Azure DevOps plus Azure Git plus Azure Boards yet for PR reviews?
No, unfortunately, not yet, but very soon.
And however, even though we don't support Azure DevOps out of the box, we have the CLI. Yes, so can you talk about the CLI, Sayed?
Yeah, we have the CLI, we have MCPs, we have a VS Code extension. So while there's no native like in UI support like GitHub, you can still use OptiBot in those other methods. So if you have access to it on CLI, even on CI/CD actually, we have a couple of people that use it there too. They have it running on their release branches. So
yeah, so Saket, reach out to us. We'd love to get you set up through the CLI. And I think, by the way, just one thing I would suggest too is if you folks are also building agents or internal products with agents, we do believe CLI is going to be the ultimate mode of communication for agents. And so versus having to support every single integration out of the box, we do think that the CLI is going to be the ultimate mode of communication. There was obviously a debate before. We actually talked about in our last episode, the great MCP versus CLI debate. We do believe that, you know, CLI is going to be the main method of comms. So I think now, you know, one of the things that I feel like has been really discussed and debated is how do you prevent agents from kind of going off on their own and making decisions or making conclusions that might not be as, you know, as relevant to like the tasks at hand. So walk us through that. And then also for the engineering managers and leaders that are joining us today, how should they be like, should there be mandates on how agents are used? Should you allow engineers to just kind of, you know, I don't know, go crazy or like just allow for any kind of token usage? What's your take on this? And I'll answer first. I think we've kind of been seeing, so out of, just for context, right now we're growing at about anywhere between 21 to 58% month over month. We, like last week, we onboarded 20 new customers. And one of the things we noticed was every single set of customers, like about 80% of engineering leaders and teams that we interview are allowing for, you know, maximal token usage, which is just, you know, start using the models, start using different forms of setup and just see, you know, where you get to in terms of building. But I think one of the things that we continue to find and we continue to hear is that the bottleneck is now becoming code review and everything that happens after the code is generated. So that's really where we help. But I am curious, Said, how you would kind of how you would answer the initial question in terms of like how should people or edge leaders be using agents and sub-agents internally?
Yeah, it's a tough question. I think it depends on the company and their structure and how many people they have. We have some really large customers where I've spoken to them and they're not allowed to use multi-stream agents or like even have work in the background. It always has to be supervised and needs to be on screen, and everything that's being outputted needs to be verified. That's kind of restrictive, but also makes sense for a lot of those large companies and the types of things that they deal with. They're in regulated spaces. And then we have some that are on the bleeding edge where it's like agents do pretty much everything that's non-critical. That's kind of what we do as well. So when we get like a UI bug or we have some minor issue with something that's not showing up on screen properly or the API needs adjustment, yep, delegate it to an agent. Now the problem with agents is if you add the ability to steer them, then it becomes disruptive. So I could be doing my own stream of work and I have an agent running and then it runs into an issue and it stops. And then it asks me a question in between. I've tried that method and a lot of times I will forget that it asked me a question or I was too busy doing something else. So in most cases, I would say if you are using them, let them do the work and then verify the output after they're finished. Steering them halfway through is really distracting.
All right. Well, folks, as a reminder, for those of you joining in, feel free to add in comments your questions. I'm really excited that in T-minus 2 minutes, we're going to be introducing our next guest. And she's been working with agents and sub-agents for a while now. And I've known her for several years. I'm really excited to have her on the show. But feel free to ask your questions in terms of your setup, what you've tried. We'd love to hear more about that. I think, you know, one of the things that's been really interesting and something that I think we should all be wary of is that the amount of code generally in terms of output has 10x'd. But funnily enough, over the last few, just over the last few weeks, we've actually been seeing them at 50x, I would even say so. And I think the thing is that usually, one very quick study we did over the last, I think in the last 6 weeks from our customers and their usage and the number of PRs that are being pushed. By the way, by default, we do zero training on customer data and we do zero code storage. But one of the things we were trying to understand was how has agent output differed from human output for our customers that have deployed agents that are generating code? Because one of the things that OptiBot does is it can review human code and obviously agent code as well. Funnily enough, agents tend to produce very large PRs, so anywhere from 25 to 40% larger versus humans. And then the other thing we're also finding is that the actual quantity of PRs that an agent produces versus a human per day. So let's say if a human is producing 5, maybe 7 is like the average we see. If you're a really high velocity team per day, an agent can produce 25 per day. And then if you can imagine like just the volume of PRs that would be sitting in your workflow, it's pretty significant. I do think this has a lot of downstream implications, and we're working really as quickly as we can, because we're seeing even just the number of PRs Optibot reviewing every day is growing exponentially. And I think it's just a really interesting problem to solve. Say just a very quick comment on this before we bring on Rebecca.
I can only give a personal anecdote here. For my own PRs, at least the 5 agents that I run consistently that have very specific tasks, I have a rejection rate of about 30%, close to 30% from Optibot. Literally, Optibot will tell me like these PRs are in a way like absolutely not permissible, and sometimes fixing them will take really long. So I sometimes just close them. Honestly, I'm like, I will go and redo this because fixing it won't have any output that I can ship into production.
Awesome. And Optibot just pinged me and said we've just picked another winner for our coffee kit. James Lamar, congratulations. You've just won the second coffee kit. And folks, as a reminder, keep posting your questions. We're picking winners throughout the hour. All right. Thank you, Gitfather, for your comments. And now it is time to welcome our next guest. Rebecca Yang is somebody I know and love. She is like an extreme high performer, I would put it that way. And as I've gotten to know her over the last couple of years, we've got to talk so much about AI agents, sub-agents, and I feel like we've kind of gone to the ends in terms of engineering productivity and having like really significant discussions around this. In fact, I think there's some interesting comments coming out around quality of PRs and metrics too. We'll delve into that. But everybody, please welcome on stage Rebecca Yang, Director of Engineering at HubSpot.
Hello. Nice to see you.
Rebecca, it is so lovely to see you. And it's so funny. So before the show, I had already started receiving questions for you to tackle before this episode. But before we get into that, welcome to Git Shit Done. I think just HubSpot has been doing so much when it comes to agents, sub-agents, and being like at the forefront of where this is all going. And obviously, we've had so many chats about engineering productivity, especially like around Optimal Insights, which is our engineering productivity solution. But let's delve into what you're seeing in terms of like day-to-day active mentorship. There's also a really cool soundbite that you had mentioned to us earlier that I don't want to spoil, but tell us how are you navigating this new era?
It has been the craziest 6 months of my career in terms of just how fast things are changing. I think something that I've been saying and repeating to almost everyone is that basically every time a new frontier model comes out, you essentially have to just like reset so much of the context, no pun intended, or maybe pun intended, that you have built up around how this technology works. Like people have these preconceived ideas about like what it's good for, what it's not good for. And they get this sort of hardened, like mental, like mindset basically of, it's not good for this, it's good for this. And they get stuck in that thinking pattern. And then 6 months later, they realize, oh, a new model came out and everything I thought is no longer true. And so, Opus 4.7 just came out. Was it this week? Was it last week? I don't even know. Might have been this week.
It was literally like just I think 4 days ago.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah, it was like 4 days ago. So I'm sort of like having it try some of the same things I had it, Opus 4.6 try before. And suddenly it's doing a better job. It's actually making better decisions. It's super interesting.
Okay, so you said something the other day that has really stuck with me: speed of forgetting. So can you tell us what that means?
So, you think about like so much of our world has been the speed of learning, right? It's like, how quickly can we learn new technologies? As an engineer, like that's always been the name of the game, is like adaptability when it comes to learning new things. And I actually think that the most valuable skill right now is how quickly you can forget things. And what I mean is sort of like all the things I said before, right? It's like you have these ideas about what this technology can and can't do. You actually need to forget that like often. And it seems like you need to forget it every couple weeks, because based on those ideas, you're going to go and decide what you should or should not do with it. And likely, if you're not actively kind of like, memory of a goldfishing your way through this year, you're going to miss opportunities because you're going to have these ideas about what like you shouldn't be using this for. And frankly, new models come out and suddenly that's no longer relevant. It's kind of wild.
I think, Rebecca, it's one thing that's really hard as a director, as a manager, for me as CEO is, when you manage people, how do you actually instill that skill of the speed of forgetting? Like, how do you help people not get, I don't know how to put this. It's, it's like, if you're painting a Picasso, or you're like, painting a painting a Vinci, it's almost like you have to not fall in love with your creation, right?
Yeah.
And so like, how do you how do you do that, and basically forget that you made this creation, and ideally you should even be willing to throw away a lot of that too.
That's a really good question, and it's sort of complicated. I would say that people remember things that got them in trouble, or made like things that were sort of like, I'll say traumatize them. But what I mean is like, let's say they do something with AI and it makes a mistake, or like something goes wrong. I think it's really important as a leader to create the right level of psychological safety for your team to be able to sort of experiment. There's obviously guardrails you need. And having those in place and having them be operationalized and structural is much better than pointing the finger at people and saying, oh, you should have just done better. And so I would say, like, in a moment like this, like, lean into the things that will make it easier for people to not remember that trauma of like a mistake, right? And I think it's just constant reminder, creating a lot of space. And I also want to say that when people are scared, they pull into themselves and they start to really focus on trying to kind of protect themselves. And so I've been really, really thoughtful about trying to make this a time of like opportunity and excitement, and trying to frame this technology in that way. It's not easy because the internet and like the news cycle can be really intimidating. And, there are things that I can't control, like, people saying that SaaS is dead or whatever. But what I can control, I try to control as best I can.
Yeah, and speaking to what you said about things changing so quickly, I feel like 6 months ago we were all talking about AI native, and now it's all about agent native. And
Yeah.
and it's funny because I expected that, right? So when we started, because we started building with agents about 14 months ago, because we went agent first with OptiBot, and I feel like as soon as we started working on, just as soon as the team started telling me that, oh, the agents are conferencing with each other, and I was like, oh, there's probably going to be a huge open source model that's going to come out, and then OpenClaw did, right? And it's like there's just so much change happening, and there's all of this pressure to experiment and iterate. And so I'm also really curious about as you're kind of managing this, and I think there's also the difference, right, between junior engineers and senior engineers too. I think for a lot of the managers, directors, and edge leaders, and even founders that have joined us today. So the question is like, is there like different ways that you're managing senior versus junior engineers, or are you trying to keep it, the same regardless of how experienced someone is? Because in my opinion, I could imagine that if someone is more junior, they'll be more likely to follow the speed of forgetting, right? Because there's just less for them to forget in terms of lifespan, right? Versus like if you're set in your ways and this is a way that you're doing things. So kind of curious how you're navigating that too.
That's an interesting question. And I can share what I'm sort of seeing in terms of who is really having a lot of success on my team and what qualities they have. I will say that in a world where increasingly your role as an engineer is really to be an eng manager or even like a team lead or tech lead, the engineers on my team who either have been a tech lead in the past or could be a tech lead are seeming to be able to drive a lot more value a lot more quickly right now. And I think it comes down to being able to imagine and sort of like think about an abstract problem, do whatever prompting you need to do to sort of paralyze it into tractable pieces that you can then delegate, having the sort of understanding of like, okay, there's this big blob of like a problem and like, what are the sub problems? Like there's still a manager involved in that. And I think that's where I'm seeing some people really stand out. But it's those same people who often like our most senior engineers are the ones who are the slowest to adopt some of the new technology, just because like they got to where they are using a different method and they are like more set in their ways. So the people who are at that intersection in the Venn diagram who have like a little bit of managerial experience, but also are really open and curious about new things, they're doing great. What I'm trying to do, because I don't want to exist in a world where we don't have any junior engineers without managerial experience, is looking into, if you think about it, there have been these sort of management training programs for new college grads who come out of college and, go work at like an enterprise rent-a-car or something like that. And I think that there is probably something similar that we can start to look into for engineering. Historically, like junior engineers just sort of cut their teeth on, small tasks. Those tasks are getting delegated away. And so what does it look like to get them to a place where they can manage teams of agents as quickly as possible? And right now, my thinking is we don't just let it happen the way it has historically, because those opportunities and the way it has happened in the past aren't going to be there forever. And so the question is, do we just say, oh, too bad, or do we go try to solve for this new reality? And I think the new reality is we need to provide more sort of managerial type training specifically for the like delegation and like breaking down problems, and really work on supporting earlier career individuals in really like honing that skill. And honestly, AI is really good for breaking stuff down. So I think that AI will probably be the answer in a lot of these scenarios.
Yeah, and Rebecca, for the eng leaders joining us today, how should they be thinking about, even I think the career ladder, right? Like you have your ICs, and then they can become principal or staff engineers, and then they may or may not choose to become managers, and then from there you have directors, and then VP, right? Would you say that hierarchy has changed in the world of agents and delegation, or is it the same? Anecdotally, so I'm part of quite a few groups of engineering leaders, and we host about 4 dinners a month in different cities. And there's at least one a month that we host here in San Francisco. It's basically just getting engineering leaders together on the table. And some of the things that, I continue to hear is just the fact that, does this hierarchy even potentially even exist anymore, right? And that career ladder, and so how is that changing? And I think one of the things I also heard from some folks was that even if they're interviewing for new roles, it's usually it's by default, it's expected that they should have familiarity with agents.
Yeah.
So kind of curious how you're seeing it in your role.
We definitely have expectations of AI fluency, and we've had that for a while, and it keeps adapting and evolving over time as the technology changes. We have it in interviewing, and we also have it with our engineering team at HubSpot. I don't expect that to change. I mean, there's been a sort of flattening of org structures that's been happening for a while in the industry. I think this accelerates it. But I honestly don't know what like the longer term looks like. Is it like one CTO and just a bunch of ICs? Possibly, but I think there's still you still need some human connection. Like, I don't know about one person managing 1,000 engineers. I don't know. That's a tough one. And I know that I'm trying to remember, someone wrote something recently talking about what the future org structure might look like. I don't think we know yet.
Yeah, and God, I have now we have a lot of questions to get through, so I'm gonna just now pause and move into the Q&A section. So folks, keep posting your comments in the Q&A. Please feel free to ask your questions. Rebecca is here to answer them, and yeah, we're also going to be bringing the Git father back. I thought so some of these questions were interesting. Dinesh was asking about insights into quality of PRs. And then I think there's actually two questions that we can take together. And then Jamie was asking about metrics, specifically other than number of PRs that we're seeing teams use in terms of measuring improvements or ROI in the development process. This is, of course, something that, Rebecca, you're familiar with, and we've worked on. I'll take the answer first, and then Rebecca, I'm curious what your thoughts are, or if they've evolved. But some of the things we do, so this is our Insights product, and we've been looking at metrics like time to open, how long PRs are taking in review, time to merge, and then this is a brand new metric we released, AI review time versus human review time, and then AI approval time as well. So AI approval time goes back to, as Optibot looks into those PRs, reviews them, is it having to re-review those PRs? How long is it taking to approve them and merge them? In fact, one of our customers decided that one repo is just fully autonomous. It's pretty much Optibot running the reviews, doing the approvals. But I think what's really interesting is that commenting on PR size, we do tend to see that whenever agents are collaborating with humans, for us internally, the sizes are getting larger. But we've been specifically making sure that Optibot is even calling out dead code and these maintainability issues in the reviews. And then some other metrics that we're finding to be important are reworks. So what percentage of the PR was reworked? And it's funnily enough, this author I'm seeing is Optibot, so it was reworking quite a few of the but it's a very small PR anyway. And then also looking at things like check failure rates. There's a whole host of metrics that we've been looking into. There's thousands of engineers now in terms of the overall data set and like the metrics that are flowing. But I think what we're finding is that agent plus human productivity is becoming a very interesting topic. And of course, Rebecca, as you remember, we co-created some of these metrics and some of these views. But I think like what's been interesting is to at least see that Optibot is taking on a lot of the review work, and that we're seeing there's less reviews happening, at least team-wide. And this is on the insight side. But I'll pause there. Rebecca, anything that comes up for you for some of these, for the questions Jamie and even Dinesh asked?
That's really cool to see like Optibot in line with the engineers there. So I think obviously lines of code, number of PRs merged is directional. And if you have none, that's probably a problem if you're an engineer, because that is usually what you were hired to do. But you also want to be providing value. I think that depending on the product that you're working on and the product that you're building, it would be very, very helpful, at least at like a team level, to have some insight into some sort of like usage or like value metric if it's possible. It's just very, very industry specific. So like in the case of something like HubSpot, looking at like NPS and or usage to see if like the work that you are doing is driving an outcome. It is always going to be a little bit directional, but it's very, very valuable. On the quality question, I think it's actually like an interesting question, and I'll give you a slightly spicy take, which is that there are some things that we have cared about a lot in the past when it comes to quality that probably don't matter as much in this future. And like, I'll give you an example, which is like really nitpicky stylistic things. Probably doesn't matter as much because a lot of what we thought about when it came to quality was human driven, right? It was about what humans cared about, and it was about what was easy for a human to grok. And like, there are probably things that will change in the future where, you know, if all of our notions of quality are human centric, in a world where it's all about agents, like maybe the average file size will get bigger. Like, I don't know. Like, and I think that's maybe okay. And the sort of, I'll point to the fact that, you know, Anthropic accidentally leaked Claude Code's source code. A lot of people were surprised by like how kind of shitty some of the code was. But there are very few products, if any, that have grown at the rate that Claude Code has grown, right? It is a very successful product. I don't care what its quality is to the people on the internet, like looking at it, it is a very, very successful product. So I would ask, like, where does it matter? Where doesn't it matter? It matters insofar as you're not accidentally leaking your source code through a source map. It matters like from a security perspective, but does it matter like, you know, small stylistic nits? Probably not. And maybe that's okay. Like maybe that's okay.
I think it goes back to, you know, that vision that we had talked about, right? Which was that, okay, if humans are going to be managing hundreds of agents, and ideally, you know, then do you really care about the fact that the PRs are huge and that, you know, there's, the thing is that right now we're caring a lot because it's just a lot of token usage and a very high, you know, Anthropic builds, and then also Anthropic starting to clamp down on it too, you know, which is like the actual, you know, the actual token usage piece, and they're starting to, you know, also clamp down on usage tiers in terms of pricing.
Yeah,
so I think what's interesting is like it's almost like you're paying for the garbage, right? So it's like if it's producing if it's producing a lot of lines of code, you're still paying for that because it's part of the generation. And I think code generation, and I think it's a really interesting viewpoint though, right? Like there's one part of me that hopes and wishes that, okay, the agents are kind of running the show here, and we are, I don't know, scuba diving or hiking, or we're outside exploring nature and exploring the world, and you know, the screen time that we know it today may change, right, for the future generation. So So yeah, lots of questions here. I think there was another one around any experience with Open Router Auto. Does it really route to cheaper models when it can do the work, or just kind of routing? And what your experiences have been with that, Rebecca, on your side.
I don't personally have any experience with it. I don't know if you all say it.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I think what we could do is let's bring Sayed onto the stage. Sayed, hello, welcome back. I know.
Hello. Good to see you, Rebecca.
Hello.
Awesome.
Open
let's see.
Router, yeah. I used to use Open Router, so I can sort of talk about it. So it does route to cheaper models. In fact, a lot of times it will route to cheaper models when it can. It works pretty well in doing that. I don't know if the quality of work meets the expectation that I have, but at least I love the latency. It was like outputting work really fast. It got it right most of the time. So it does do that. I've tried it on Copilot as well. That one has been pretty horrible. I think it like defaults to using haiku at times, and it can hallucinate. So I think setting it on auto, a lot of people like Copilot gives you a 10% discount if you use their auto router. I don't know if Open Router does that, but these are all subjective. I think there's something in the back that says like, oh, if it's like editing 2 files, go use a cheap model for it. So I think there's hard coded somewhere. It's not really smart. So I think that's the only downside of that. So pick your model. I mean, if you're using Claude Code or anything like that, just pick one that you're comfortable with.
Great. And guys, this is a question for both Optimal and HubSpot. How is your team dealing with all of this change and really the pace of change? Rebecca, why don't you go first?
How does my team deal with this pace of change? I mean, someone once told me that change affects humans in the same place of the brain that like pain hits them sometimes. And so change can be really hard. And I think there is like a almost like natural human trait to like want to avoid it. I think it requires a lot of mindfulness. Candidly, I think a lot of people are struggling, but I have been frankly inspired and really like proud of the way that my team has handled the last year. It's a lot, but it's like the best thing for them. It's the best thing for HubSpot and HubSpot's customers for us to embrace it. But I think it's going to be a wild ride. We're going to have to like grab our surfboard, ride the waves.
Roller coaster surfboard. Okay, Sayed, what about us as a startup? Yes.
Yeah.
You know,
I think it's just as uncomfortable as a large company, even in a startup, right? We have customers just like everyone else does, and it's still scary to pick up this new piece of technology, and it's changing every week. Even though we sit on Fridays and we chat about and we're like, let's do this, it's still like, okay, what are the risks that we are going to take on? So while we embrace it, we're still careful with it. That's how I think about it.
Okay, OptiBot just pinged me. We have 2 winners this time around for the coffee kit. Okay, so the 2 winners are Dinesh Makija. Congratulations. And then our second winner is Tushara Wijeratna. Congratulations, both of you. And you folks will be getting our coffee kit. That's 2 winners. Okay. All right. And comments are coming in. But Rebecca, this was one question I actually got before the show for you, was usage. So charging, right? Like, so folks that are building agents too, I know one of the things that we also talked about, and hopefully we'll get to, I've been meaning for us to set up a session so that we can talk about this too, right? Usage, like charging on usage for agents, or charging on outcomes versus, you know, per seat or the more traditional SaaS pricing. What's been your experience with that?
I mean, in a world where agents can do the job of many, many seats, and you don't need as many seats to get value out of a product, it's hard to imagine per seat pricing being something that stays around for a long time, Like, I really do think for most teams, unless it's a product where like literally you need seats, I think for a lot of products where the value is delivered agentically, it's going to accrue to something more like a value based value or usage. And really, like, value is usage if you think about it. Ideally, it's value based. Ideally, like, and the reason why is when you're talking to someone's finance team and trying to sell your product, if you can say, okay, you're going to give me $1,000 and I'm going to give you $10,000 in value, it's an easy sell. If you say you're going to give me $1,000 and I'm going to give you 10,000 credits and here's what you can do with those credits, there's a little more math involved. So they're going to be doing that math on their end to try to figure out the value. The easier you make it for them, the easier it is to get that signature.
Yeah, because I think that's what's really hard, right? It's at the what we do right now is we've done the flat rate pricing for unlimited code reviews, which was a really big deal a couple of weeks ago when Claude Code announced that reviews are going to be up to up to potentially $25 per review based on the size of PR. So I remember when we announced it, we had a pretty significant bump in usage. But I think what's been interesting is the flat rate pricing. It's at about $29 per user per month. And I think but that's unlimited code reviews, right? And so the value is pretty high. Now, the thing is, when we introduced our security agent and our new fixer agent, which is where OptiBot can actually fix the issues it finds, and then it can also run full code base, like it can scan the whole code base for security issues. Those are completely two separate agents with a very different set of skills. For that, we had to introduce usage-based pricing. And we're still testing it. We're testing it a ton. But I think what's been interesting is like, it's a very different switch in the user's mind to go from because they have the subscription on the reviews, but then to switch it to adding their credit card for usage. That's been something we've really been thinking through. And
but it's like, if the cost of goods sold or like the underlying cost for you is really high, it's really hard to make unlimited work when you have like, you can have a few users that just completely kill your margins, right? And so it's not an easy.
Yeah, it's definitely not. Well, Rebecca, unfortunately, folks, that is all the time we have today for questions. And we're going to be staying on for another 5 more minutes or so, just to kind of answer some of the questions that are remaining in the comments. But Rebecca, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been lovely and so insightful. And I know we didn't get to answer all the questions that folks had for you, Rebecca, but yeah, and this time around our StreamYard worked. so I'm really glad, but thank you so much for joining us, Rebecca.
Thank you. Great.
Thank you. All right. So before we kind of go into that, I know OptiBot has a few quick words that I'd like to say.
I got this.
All right. Well, that was OptiBot. I think, Syed, we have a couple more questions to address, and then we're going to be calling it to a close. I think one of the things we've kind of seen questions asked around was, I thought this was a really good one that Dinesh asked, unit tests.
Yeah.
Like what's happening with integration validation, the same challenge as PR review. Completely agree with this, by the way, Dinesh. We're actively working on this problem too. And exactly, a lot of this will come back to building skills and agents along with the feature. So can you comment on this? And then another question we had was around QA and testing workflows too. Maybe we'll just address both questions in one go, but Mohammed's asking, how has your team's QA and testing workflow changed for agents? And are you moving away from traditional unit tests towards evaluation pipelines that measure confidence scores? Let's start with Dinesh first.
Yeah, I don't think unit tests are going away anywhere either. I still think they're like the lowest denominator. Like everyone should do them if they can. You can create mocks so easily now. They sound like they're static to a lot of people. Like, oh, do integration tests. Integration tests are really heavy lift. So I think if you can do the bare minimum, do a unit test. It's not a bad thing to do. And then, yeah, if for the PR review, it's really about building up those skills in there. Again, shameless plug for our own product. Like we manage the context, so you don't have to do that in any way. And I think even managing skills is not easy. Like I have constantly for my personal ones, I have to keep going back and updating them. Yeah, and then I think the next question was on like evals. I think if your product is deeply integrated with AI, you have to run evals in some shape or form. Whereas like for your SaaS side of your app, yeah, you can have integration tests, unit tests, but you still have to come up with the use cases, or you have to prompt to make sure you get edge cases. So that's usually, and if you're doing like playwright tests, it's another whole thing. So there's a lot of nuances, and I've noticed that people have been like cutting down on their QA team. So now again, engineers are now responsible for thinking of all of those use cases.
Yeah, it's crazy. We just this week we held a dinner with Forbes, and the engineering leaders that attended. One of them was a company that was that's over 1,000 people, and they told us that their QA team is just a few folks, and that was really shocking to me because I thought it was just a trend that was happening at startups where QA teams are becoming like almost down to zero. But I wasn't expecting that was the case also in larger orgs. And then James is asking, do you find minimizing context is still, I thought this was a really good question, still important to get results from agents? And do you find different models do better for certain tests? This is really, I was like, I didn't want to end the show before getting to this question because it was such a good one.
Yeah, I can give my personal opinion. I do think minimizing context is still important, and pointing to the right information really cuts down on the tool calls, which gives the model more space to use its own thinking budget. Now on Anthropic's models and on like Cloud Code, at least with Opus, it requires more thinking tokenization and inference. And so on that case, you do want to leave most of that context window for it to go through the problem. For writing tests, I actually think the cheaper models work really well. Like I use Haiku sometimes or Sonnet, and it writes pretty good tests. But when it comes to sorting out business logic and where things can possibly break or microservices, I think using the most expensive capable model with the largest context window still makes sense. And over there, I don't think there's a benefit of like minimizing context either. So I'm not saying leave it extremely open-ended, but just give it enough where it can figure its own way around. And don't like also temper on its like creativity, because that thinking budget is its thought process.
What's interesting is that for OptiBot, the biggest value prop that we've seen with our customers was actually full code based context. That was the main value prop, which is that before OptiBot runs a review, it's looking at things like past developer comments, past PRs, and we're really trying to stretch what's possible in terms of full code based context and what it means, especially for our customers that have giant code bases that are like 10 plus years old. But I think this was a really interesting problem for us to solve. And I think you had even talked about chunking at one point, Sayed.
Yeah, we chunk the problem down. The other thing we do is we try to leave at least 80% of that context window for the thinking and the code for the agent itself, instead of having like a really massive prompt, which is what skills do, by the way. They actually just append your repetitive instructions into that base prompt, and then from there it kind of goes through it. So we cut down on that so that it's not making excessive tool calls and like churning through it. Although like for the fixer agent, that's sort of unavoidable because it does need to go in a loop. So there's different use cases here.
All right. Well, folks, that was episode 3 of Get Shit Done. We had such a great time with all of you. Episode 4 is happening very, very soon. And so just FYI, we're going to be posting a quick link to the episode show. We would love to have you join our next episode as well. We're one of the great things about this show is that we're able to just take questions live, but then also have operators on the show that are able to talk about what they're experiencing as they're getting shit done. This is an interesting time. I think we're all navigating quite a bit of change, but it's always great and good to navigate it together, right? That's really what we're hoping to achieve with the show. And so folks, don't forget, you can sign up for our next episode. The link should be posted in the comments shortly. But the other thing, of course, also is that OptiBot is available for you. So we're doing about 15 to 20 demos a week. We would love to take you through a walkthrough of OptiBot, and then also Insights, which is our engineering productivity product that really details how engineering productivity is evolving in your org. And then with OptiBot, as you know, it runs code reviews with full code base context. And really the big difference in terms of how we're approaching the problem is that they're not shallow local reviews. We're really working on deep code base reviews and deep reviews in terms of getting to the standard as to what you would expect from a human engineer, especially one that is very skilled in that part of the code base. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Congratulations to the winners of the coffee kits as well. Watch out for emails from us on how to redeem and get your coffee kits. But thank you so much for joining us for this episode. We had a great time hanging out with y'all, and we will see you in the next one. Just posted the sign up link for our next episode on the Luma. So feel free to sign up on that link. But if you've joined this episode, we will be inviting you in the next one as well. And I think we're already getting some requests on what to explore in the next session, in the next episode. If you folks do have certain requests, feel free to post those too. Just FYI, we're always listening. And we also sometimes take questions even in advance if you sent those in advance based on the show. So again, thank you so much, and happy prompting and happy AIing as we all get shit done. All right, over and out.
Lines refined, it's a pristine scene. Future of the craft, you know what I mean. Variables tangled, Opti unties the knot. Logic rewired, every bug gets caught. Precision surgical, scalpel to the stack, turning messy code into a polished track. Zeros and ones, it's the rhythm of the grind. OptiBot flows with the powerful